So we're just gonna be talking about Atlantis, just theories and if it's real or not, or just theories, hypotheses, and conclusions or analysis on Atlantis. The Atlantis, what I mean by that is the island city-state that Plato was talking about when referring to the possible Temple of Edfu text, which was built under the Ptolemy era of Egypt. The Ptolemies, one of the most famous being Cleopatra the Seventh of Egypt. So that means that Plato had got his original idea of Atlantis from an Egyptian, which was Solon. Solon was an Egyptian priest at the Temple of Sais. So I did say the Edfu text. So, I would say somewhere between the Edfu text and the Temple of Sais, which maybe there's a similarity between those two. But regardless, it was from Egypt, an Egyptian priest, and an Egyptian temple. This on that temple, it was describing a nation state that had collapsed. A nation state with chariots, elephants, agriculture, hot and cold water springs. That was also considered an island, at least in the Greek terminology, which may sometimes mean a peninsula, something like a peninsula like Spain, or maybe the Gulf of Mexico, North Africa, sometimes maybe even Italy, Troy. So those would be maybe things that are peninsulas, but still may have been considered islands in a certain interpretation of the text. So considering, okay, so we're talking about Plato got this story from Egypt. Okay, it's about Atlantis. Okay, all these people trying to say it's fake. They used to say Troy was fake. Now you found out Troy is real. A war between the Greeks and the Trojans. Okay, the Mycenaean Greeks before their collapse. Solon told Plato or whoever, he said, bro, you think that collapse was something, the Greek collapse? He said, y'all more ancient than that, and there's been Greeks before y'all Greeks. Just like we know is history before our history, especially pre-flood. Shit, it's harder to say what happened 400 years ago, let alone 5 years ago. And so I'm gonna do my best to say what happened in Atlantis. Also, my perspective may be biased as a Black American, but I'm still not trying to imply my bias. I'm trying to add from my perspective as a descendant of Africa, Native American, Egyptian, Moorish, Hebraic, all those combined royal descents. I'm just gonna put in my best as a descendant of Carthage and Troy. And also as a native, had the native blood as well. So I'm just saying my perspective. So the closest thing from recent times that I've seen related to Atlantis is Tenochtitlan, Mexico. The most recent thing. And when Cortez came there, and you look at the map layout of Tenochtitlan, it literally looks like Atlantis, okay? So that is the most recent, I think, closest thing that we could say was a derivative of Atlantis. Okay, was the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan in Mexico. That was the most recent. till Cortez came and said, oh goodness, and all the Eagle Warriors. The most recent, but that was 1600s. That was 1600 AD, 1400s AD, okay? That was like 400 years ago. Atlantis was before that. And temples are built on other temple mounds, which ultimately is like a mountain, like the Scythians, the Cahokias of Missouri. Many temples, even in Egypt, temples are built on older temples of their fathers. So it starts with a small temple to what? Poseidon, temple to God, altar to God, temple to the sun and the moon, temple to what? Chicloc, what the rain god, okay? But regardless, the idea of Atlantis is there's a temple in the middle of the island, just like Tenochtitlan, okay? And this temple was built up over generations. And from that temple, you know, you have the land for agriculture, horses, chariots, merchants, warehouses. You got all that, okay? Plato describes it all very vividly, how the layout was. He says 3,000 stadia by 2,000 stadia. So he's not saying some mythical island when he's giving you specific characteristics, not only of the animals they use, the warfare, the seafaring, the trade, the logistics, the warfare, the trade agreements. He's giving you the elements of the island, okay? He says there's mountains. So my connection, okay, so from Mexico, then we go back. What's the more recent one from Mexico, from the Aztecs? I'll say the more recent one from them was Carthage, the Empire of Carthage. And then Rome took Carthage over. Hannibal, Barca. Rome took over. And when Plato describes the Empire of Atlantis, he says it's a Mediterranean civilization which controlled the borders, the coast, of course. So when you think of that, maybe the ancient Greeks empires, they were like that. The Trojans, the Egyptians, the Canaanites, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Tyrians. They also say the Iberians, which of course, the Pillars of Heracles is at Mount Atlas and Iberia, okay? So between Spain and Africa, Morocco, it's not that much space. So of course, people are going back and forth between Africa and Europe, okay? The Berbers, the Moors, Africans, okay? So Spain is a number one. Okay, so let me just go back. Okay, so yeah, Carthage, then Rome. So Rome, when you look at the territory of the Roman Empire, that pretty much matches the description of Atlantis. So, and they say America is Atlantis. So what I'm trying to say is, in a sense, the modern day will always be Atlantis. That civilization at the time, which is number one, like I'm in America right now, we are Atlantis and the descendants of them. Okay, so whoever in 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and 5,000 and 10,000 years, they're gonna look at America. Some people gonna be like, damn, was America real? Was it really niggas there? You know, did this happen, that happened? You know, they gonna talk about, maybe they'll talk about America like they talk about Atlantis. Like, damn, they had it from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from Canada to Mexico. And I'm like, what the fuck? They had, you know, maybe, but so the present day will always be descendants of Atlanteans, that, you know, if you think about it. But so Rome was an empire, before that the Greeks, and then a Mycenaean, the Greek civilizations, and then you go back more, it'll be Carthage, or the Phoenicians. And you think of the Carthaginian base, first they were in Tyre by the Hebrews, okay, and the Egyptians. Then they come over to Carthage and found their new city state after they had to do it a lot over there. You got the Persians, Greeks, all that's going on. Okay. So Carthage comes over here. That's how you have the story of the Aeneid, of Aeneas coming from Troy and then founding Rome and Italy. But before he goes to Italy, he goes to Carthage and meets with Queen Dido, and then somehow, breaks her heart, and that's how you get the curse of Dido. But Aeneas goes on to found Rome. The descendant of Troy comes on to found Rome, but before he goes there, he goes to Carthage, which is pretty interesting. That's a very interesting story where you have a Trojan pretty much exile, or, just people on Exodus, and during his Exodus, he lands into Carthage and then makes his way to Italy against the native Etruscans, and then founds Rome. That's pretty a crazy story, from the old world to the new world, and just ties of civilizations. But so that's what I'm going with. This is, we're tying in the mythology with religion, with science and history and geography and mythology, So let's just go with what we can go with about what we can, let's be sensible here. So Carthage, I'm trying to go back. The Greeks were a seafaring nation. The Tyrians, okay, that's pretty much what I could think right now. And then further I could go back is, I think of Babylon. And even in the Bible, let's tie into biblical history, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Abraham came from Padam Aram, kind of like the Mesopotamian above Palestine area, Syria. But pretty much you think of the Mesopotamian region and the Babylon Empire, Assyria, Ninevites. And you think geographically, especially in the old world, the Mesopotamian region is really the middle of the world. It's the middle of Asia, middle of Africa, middle of Europe. Is that whole Mesopotamia area. So how they say life came from there, whether it came from Mesopotamia or Africa, hey, it came from somewhere, and it's not that far apart. And people travel, okay? People travel. Let's stop acting like people cannot be, I'm right here by all these different cultures right now. So it happens. And people travel. That's what I'm trying to say, is people travel. Okay? So we have this Babylon, even in the Bible talks about the flood, and also the breaking down the Tower of Babel, splitting up the languages. So between the flood myth and the Tower of Babel, it's kind of still Atlantean, reminiscent of Atlantis, because you're talking about a civilization that's wiped out by a flood. The temple, this is, is coming down. The temple of Babylon, the ziggurat. Let's exalt ourselves to the highest depths above God. We do that maybe in America with our towers and even churches, maybe sometimes even with our spirits. We think we're above God, because we got money, a house, a car, or we have technology. What is technology really? Because that don't mean shit. You're just going somewhere faster. I hope you're going in the right direction. But regardless, so you have this Babylonian, and you think about before the flood, these people were living thousands of years, so they had enough time to really build something. So how did they build these megalithic? How did they build Baalbek? How did they build Stonehenge? How did they build the pyramids of Giza? How did they build Tenochtitlan? How? When you have time and you're building over your father's and your father's father's things, and it's getting passed down, many things can happen. especially when you add in the wealth and you want to found this temple and bury your daughters and princesses in generations. You're going to try to make a landmark statement. So that's where we get the Tower of Babel, which also is, okay, you could say, okay, between the Anunnaki and everything, they're very, you have a lot of similarities. I'll say that, okay? So the actual mythology is Poseidon. Even Herodotus says Poseidon is a son of what, Atlas? Okay, so Mount Atlas is in Morocco, North Africa territories, at least in modern times. In ancient times, they were referred to as the Numidians, the Moors, the Berbers, the Numidians, Moors, Ethiopians, Berbers. Oh yes, and of course the Libyans. Number one, the ancient Libyans. That's what Herodotus and Plato refers to them as a lot, Libyans. So either Ethiopians or Libyans in ancient times. Okay, so the ancient Libyans. Okay, and we're talking about an island. So Poseidon and his sons, Atlas, and then Atlas, one of his sons were Triton. Sound like the Little Mermaid. So Triton, you have Lake Tritonis. Look up Lake Tritonis in Africa. Or just look up Lake Tritonis, it's gonna pop up in Africa. Look up Lake Tritonis though. And it's off the coast of, I'll say, Lepus Magna, Libya area. Okay? So basically I'm going from Mount Atlas, North Africa, kind of more to the, closer to Egypt, between Egypt and Carthage, okay? That's where you have the Lake Tritonis. And then you have the Richat structure, which is in West Africa, on the coast of West Africa, the Richat structure, which is what I want to say close to maybe Benin, but I'm just trying to say that area. And then also you have Carthage, which is also reminiscent and is close to that area. And what I'm trying to say with these four and then also you have Egypt, which is said to be you hear people say that it was a colony of Atlantis. And I was talking about Mexico too. So these islands, through the Canary Islands, then through Cuba, Hispaniola, Haiti, Jamaica, you make your way to Mexico. Then you make your way here. I'm in California right now. Then they made their way here. This used to be Mexico. Okay? So through the islands, from the Canary Islands to the I forgot what they call those islands, but Jamaica and them, Cuba and them, then in Mexico. That's how you get the temple network and the trade network. Okay? And then like I said, you have Carthage, the Atlas Mountains, Morocco, West Africa, Benin area, the Richat structure, and then Lake Tritonis, and then of course Egypt. These are five different civilizations, five different, areas, I'll say the least. Same people but different cultures. What I'm trying to say is that these were a connected culture, and there was these trade routes passing through from the Canary Islands to the Richat structure to the Atlas Mountains, and also from the Richat structure there was from like Timbuktu, cutting actually, not besides the coastline, also through the interior of Africa, I say through the Sahara pretty much, leading up to Carthage area in Lepus Magna, Libya. Modern time Libya and ancient Libya. Look at the map, you want to see Europe, Libya, Asia. Jerusalem in the middle. Okay. Another empire I forgot to mention was the Kingdom of Solomon which was said to be one of the most wealthiest empires ever, according to the Bible, King Solomon. And King Solomon, he built his temple with the Phoenician cedar wood, which means he also used the Phoenician navy to get to the trade routes to Britain, to the trade routes to Spain, through Africa. He used the Phoenician ships and Phoenician to build the greatest temple. All these Moors and Scottish rites and Scientology, and the Moors are us. We built the first temples. We built the pyramids that they can't figure out. We built Stonehenge they can't figure out. We're the original Masons. That's why they call them free Masons. Just how now I'm supposed to be a free man, free Mason. So we are the Masons. And that goes back to Atlantis. We're talking about building temples and connecting canals and waterways and springs and ridges. And okay, we're building beautiful islands over our ancestors' buildings, just like we're doing now in America. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is King Solomon and Carthage, the kingdom of what? Israel and Carthage, the Phoenicians, the Tyrians, Sidonians, they were pretty much allies. Whatever the agreement was, he was using the, he treated King Hiram of the Phoenicians well. Okay. So I'm connecting that empire, civilization, kingdom, the Israelite, Phoenician, Berber, Moorish, Egyptian kingdom, which derived from Mesopotamia through Abraham, okay? I'm just trying to tie it all together because we're talking about mythology, history, science, culture, religion, all kind of crazy shit, okay? So even since the days of King Solomon, what, 1200, what was that, BC or something, or 800? But even in those times, you have the Phoenicians doing trade worldwide. Mediterranean-wide, at least. Mediterranean-wide, ancient worldwide, to their view of the world. What if you was born on an island, you thought that was the world right there, just that island. We all got our own Atlantis, our own island, our own extent, our own boundaries. What am I going to do today different? Where am I go differently? We have our own islands, our own Atlantises. Okay. So let's go back to ancient Libya. I'm trying to just say that these networks have been connected. We try to act like Africa is some, we was cuts but even 400 years ago, we were royalty. We are royalty descendants. Okay. Even on the voyage to America, you have Columbus, the Nino brothers, Pedro Alonso Nino, which was the captain of the ship, a brother, a black man, in Spain, Iberia. Which I'm just saying that to explain that we were still on the Moors, descendants of Egypt's Moors empire, Atlantean, Neo-Atlantean civilizations still have always had an imprint on technology, even to this very day. Lights, cars, phones, skateboards, medicine, everything, food, music, dance, painting. Okay, this is all from Atlantis, not even from Atlantis, because Atlantis is, let's go back to the story. Atlantis was, Plato says Atlantis was at war with the Greeks. He's talking to, Solon told Plato that Atlantis was at war with the Greeks and the Egyptians. And that the Atlantean Empire expanded pretty much from west of the Nile to Tyrrhenia, which I believe is either Italy, Tyrrhenia. Okay, to me that kind of sounds like the Libyans, ancient Libyans, whose empire would encase Western Africa, Northern Africa, up to Egypt. And their colonies, even if you, their colonies would be expanding into Greece. You have the story of Cadmus of the Phoenicians, who founded Thebes in Greece. I was like, why is Thebes in Egypt and there's a Thebes in Greece? There's a Thebes in Egypt and there's a Thebes in Greece. And there's a Phoenician ancient band of Thebes, a fighting unit. Thebes, Thebes, Thebes. And Thebes in Egypt, Thebes in Phoenicia, Thebes in Greece. Thebes. You know why? Because Cadmus, one of his colonies, was founded in Thebes, which means you had brothers coming over into Greece, whether they're Egyptian, Phoenician, or Libyan. Okay? It goes back to the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, like I've been talking about, and the Moors, the Libyan and the ancient Libyans. The ancient Libyans, my bad. So Atlantis were, so we have these ancient Atlanteans of ancient Libya going to war with the Greeks and going to war with the Egyptians. But just like Apocalypto, by this time, you know, they're deranged, in a deranged state of society because they're doing more, maybe they're doing more human sacrifice, or, you know, they've lost their sense of their elevated society. We no longer honor our gods and our forefathers. Just like America, we forgot George Washington and Harriet Tubman. Okay? Theodore Roosevelt. Abraham Lincoln. Like, if we really respected them and revered them, we'd be in a better off state when it comes to freedom and society. But we're in a more degraded state, just like Atlantis was. Just like the fall of Babylon. Just like the fall of Rome. I guess once you get to a certain wealth and status, we tend to elevate ourselves to try to elevate ourselves above God, or act like we don't need him anymore. And that's when the temples fall. In Apocalypto, you've seen people whose gods were supposed to live forever perish overnight. You've seen people outlive their own gods, who were technically supposed to be immortal. So what I'm trying to say is, we've seen civilizations fall, so why do we act like there wasn't an Atlantis that fell? We've seen seafaring nations. I probably said 5 different ones. So why do we act like there wasn't an Atlantis seafaring nation? That takes me back to Lake Tritonis. In Lake Tritonis, there was like a fountain of, I forgot, not a fountain of youth, but a place of eternal food. Meat, pretty much meat, milk, and water, something like that. Lavender flavored water or something like that. But my point is, there's a story where Herodotus was saying that even the Greek gods used to go, oh no, my bad, this is Ethiopia. But even the Greek gods used to go to Ethiopia and feast there, and dine with the gods in Ethiopia, which still, the story still tries in with Lake Tritonis. You have the story of the Argonauts, and Jason is sent around, just like Hercules had his labors, Jason and the Argonauts had his labors. Part of his labors was going to Lake Tritonis. So even in their mythology, in his stories, you have a Greek Jason and the Argonauts going into Lake Tritonis, which is in Africa, Libya. While he's there, you have like Atlas, or no, Triton, King Triton, and he helps them get back on to the sea on their voyage. So what I'm trying to show you is that ancient Libya is referenced in ancient times as Poseidon, as descendants of Poseidon, as the Atlas Mountains. Okay, there's evidence of them going into Greece, founding territories into Spain. Of course, trading relations, whether war, diplomatic, whichever relations, and other relations. All right, so I'm just gonna tie it up. You have these ancient Libyans, and their descendants are the Berbers, the Numidians, which lead up to the, you have the Numidian cavalry, the Numidians that fought alongside Carthage and also alongside Rome as mercenary units and allies in different, treaties. Who are these ancient Libyans, these forgotten Libyans, these Berbers, these ancestors of the Moors? Who are these ancient Libyans whose god was Poseidon, whose mountain is Atlas, who had Lake Tritonis, who Athena came from? Homer or Plato, I'm not sure which one, has a story about Athena fighting Pallas. It's something about like Athena battling Pallas, the Libyan nymph, and something happens to where they're supposed to be sparring or fighting with a shield and a Corinthian helmet, which they're pretty much fighting Greek style, but of course we still have our spears and shields, even Egyptian, but pretty much Athena ended up slaying Pallas throughout their sparring match. And that's how you get Pallas, which was also leads to the Palladium of Troy. I think the Palladium of Rome. I think it came to Rome, to Greece, different people. But the Pallas originated in Libya, and so did Athena, so did Poseidon. So there's many stories. I tried from Jason to the Argonauts, to Athena, to the Palace of the Palladium, okay, to King Atlas and the Atlas Mountains, the rich hot structures. So what I'm trying to say is that these ancient Libyans, whose descendants were the Numidians, whose descendants were the Moors, which the Moors, in blood is from the natives to the Egyptians, to the Hebrews, Canaanites, Mesopotamians, okay? All the way to the Americans of today. So I'm just letting you know from my perspective that I believe Atlantis was ancient Libya, especially before the flood, before the Libya, Africa, Sahara was green. There was a green Sahara, and there were lakes and waterways and islands. This is my main point, is that there were islands in Africa. It was not always a desert. So look up the desertification of North Africa, of the Sahara. Look up Lake Tritonis. Look up what Africa used to look like 8,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago. And then you start to see, wow, this does look like Atlantis. Wow, I see why they had to spread to Egypt, or why they may have spread to North Africa, especially after the desertification of Lake Tritonis. Because there were trade routes going from West Africa through to Carthage, Lepus Magna, Libya area. That's where the connection comes from. That's what I'm trying to say is, why is the rich hot structure in North Africa, in Libya, and Egypt? You're trying to say, oh, this is Atlantis, or this, that theory. What I'm trying to say is, yeah, it was. Because you have these cultures interchanging in networks and trade routes from the border, through the sea, through the land. Okay? Especially if you have a theocracy, maybe the religion spread, maybe the food spread, what part of the culture spread, maybe the music spread. Maybe it was the music. But maybe it was the bards. I'm just a bard, man. I'm just a bard I'm just a starving bard. But so the ancient Libyans, I believe when you tie in the actual science and history and mythology, it makes sense that they were the Atlanteans. And if not, at least one of the sects of the Atlanteans, at least one of the nations of them, one of the descendants of them, because the evidence is clear. The evidence is clear. Everything I've stated is look upable, from the mythology to the geography, to the history, to the cultures. Okay? So the ancient Libyans, now, you know, you call us Black Americans, Negroes, colored. You are descendants of Atlantis, descendants of Egypt, Carthage, the Canaanites, Mesopotamians, the natives, the Aboriginals, okay, the Dravidians, the Indians, India, okay. Atlantis was a nation state, a seafaring nation state that went to war with Egypt and the Greeks. They had chariots for warfare. The Egyptians had chariots, and then the Mahabharata, the Indians have chariots, and it is stated in different sources that the Libyans have chariots, even down to their old hieroglyphs on walls, carvings. I bet if we either reveal what is on those walls at Egypt, or, you know, the more we look into, the more we dig up, because everything, we're so much beneath our feet, the more to be revealed every day. The more it's just beneath our feet. We just can't see it because we so high up, just like Atlantis, okay? So what I'm trying to say is that these Libyans would sail into these Canary Islands, linking to Mexico, linking to the Greeks, linking to Egypt. And when you look at their status, I believe they used to be pretty dominant, or at least haughty enough to go to war with Egyptians and the Greeks and try to conquer the Mediterranean, just like the Romans and Carthaginians and Greeks have tried to do. And the Romans pretty much successfully did. The Romans did it. I'm not gonna, the Romans beat the Egyptians. They beat them all. The Romans beat them all, okay? They came back for their ass, but once you got Cleopatra, once you got Hannibal, once you got the Carthage, I was like, damn. Then you got the Cleopatra. I'm like, damn, you got her too. You got Jesus. Come on, Rome. So yeah, just want to let y'all know about Atlantis, this mythological, ancient seafaring race and island that is beneath the waves now, beneath the Sahara, beneath the sands, 11,000 years ago. Long, long ago, this mythical island.